Welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know. This is where I talk to a specifically fun person on the D&D team, Ari Levitch. Hi, Ari.
Hello, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. It's been a while since we've done a Lore You Should Know, but just in case you need to know, it is where we talk about a specific part of Dungeons & Dragons lore to know and enjoy, but also potentially for use in your upcoming D&D sessions. And today, in honor of The Wild Beyond the Witchlight coming out next month, we wanted to talk about etiquette in the Feywild in general, but also more specifically in the small area of Prismeer that we're exploring in The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So, Ari, what can you tell us about the kind of where this idea of the behaviors that you do in the Feywild might be different from those you might experience on the material plane?
Yeah, so the Feywild is an odd place, especially compared to the material plane. It is the expectations of one's behavior in the Feywild differ from domain of delight to domain of delight. So, but what we do know is that in the Feywild itself, there are these kind of weird behavioral quirks that, whether you know it or not, as somebody visiting the Feywild, you are expected to follow. Like you often don't get the free pass because you're not from around here. But both denizens and visitors to the Feywild are supposed to adhere to these rules. Now, oftentimes the rules aren't necessarily the rules might be pretty clearly stated, but the interpretations of those rules might be a little different. So I want to talk about Prismeer specifically. This is the domain of delight that is featured in The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. And the rules of etiquette were established by Zybilna, the archfey who established this domain. And Zybilna set down three major rules. There's the rule of hospitality, ownership, and reciprocity. And so I'll break some of those down, but then I want to get into some of the nuances of how these could be interpreted or perhaps misconstrued, and all the hijinks that can ensue from there.
Right, it's almost like a wish spell. How you can get what you want, but it may not be exactly what you were expecting.
Right. So the first rule that Zybilna set down is the rule of hospitality. Now, the rule of hospitality is, if somebody enters your home, you are supposed to treat them, with hospitality. You are not, you're not supposed to attack somebody in your home, and you're supposed to treat them as honored guests, unless they violate they violate your hospitality. If they abuse your hospitality or they take advantage of it, and then kind of all bets are off. Now, what that means and what might offend a particular Fey denizen, we don't know. So, for example, if you are, you might be enjoying some tea in a Fey household, and if you perhaps maybe spill a little bit of your tea by accident, or you put your cup down in the wrong spot, like that might be a violation. So there are these kind of weird off-kilter interpretations of what hospitality means or what it could mean. And you always, as somebody visiting the Feywild, you want to be cognizant of the fact that the rules the way that you think the rule is meant to be read might be a little bit different, but there is always the rule of hospitality. And so part of the joy of playing in the Feywild, or DMing for an adventure in the Feywild, is being able to play with what these rules actually mean to the particular Fey denizens that are there.
I see. So are there ways that some Fey get around that by getting around this law of hospitality or rule of hospitality by, filling the teacup up all the way, and so it's impossible not to spill it? But you broke the rule, so now I can stab you and take your stuff.
Yeah. There are some, just because denizens live in this domain of delight and they adhere to these rules in their own way, doesn't mean that they won't try to get other people to violate them or commit some sort of social faux pas or things like that. Absolutely, you're going to have mischievous ones. You're going to have ones that are going to try to throw roadblocks in your way.
Mm-hmm.
On
So
top
it's like
of that,
insurance companies.
I don't know. Is it? Yeah.
Oh, you didn't do this the right way, so we can't pay out, or whatever.
And you didn't know. Yeah. In Prismere, while Zabilna is the one who set down these rules, she's kind of MIA right now, and so those rules are still in place because they're part of the fabric of the Domain of Delight. But how the hags that are now kind of running the domain in her stead have kind of carved up the domain into their own little splinter realms. And each hag kind of adheres to these rules in their own way. And so the idea of hospitality might vary from one of these splinter realms to splinter realms.
I see.
The things that might, get on Bavlorna, who's one of the hags, might get on her nerves is very different than what might get on Skabatha's nerves, or might violate the terms of hospitality there.
Do you have to be invited in to an abode in order to have to follow the rules of hospitality?
Not necessarily, but once you are there, you're supposed to be protected by it, or you until you violate whatever terms those are. Right. So invitation is not a prerequisite. Okay.
I'm also reminded of that idea in the works of George R.R. Martin, right, where you have to have if you share bread and salt with a host, that means that you have guest privileges, right? And it's similar to that, but there's no need to exchange or be served in order to follow under that, right?
That's right. And I mean, a lot of these things, I mean, in terms of all of these laws, or anytime we talk about, the Feywild and these kind of quirky rules of etiquette, they're drawing upon folklore, and a lot of folklore is about kind of lessons on how people should live, day to day. And so, these kind of, in this case, hospitality, ownership, and reciprocity, these are basically how do you conduct yourself with other individuals. And so, you're going to notice that a lot of the things that's show up in, the Game of Thrones series are drawing on a lot of the same concepts of how do you behave in a society with other people. And the fun part about the Feywild is often what happens. Those are all the cautionary tales when you violate those things, right? That's what happens with, Fey and kind of just mischievous folklore creatures. It's just those that violate it, they're the ones that kind of get their comeuppance.
If you do violate it, is there any way to make good or to apologize or do something in order to regain that protection?
There's not like a formal way in Prismere of just if how do you make amends in the eyes of the domain or in the eyes of the archfey. That's not really clearly defined. So it might fall to the individual fey, who the one who is offended may be the one to set those terms, and they may be harsh terms. And if it's a particularly powerful fey, you may want to make sure you make good on that. So and that's one of the things. Like the Feywild is such an interesting place because it can go from how quickly it can go from something that feels innocuous and adorable and quirky to erratic or dangerous, right? There is that kind of sense of, perhaps you're not sure if you're stepping where you shouldn't, and you don't know all the rules here, or you don't know all the ins and outs of the rules. You only have about 60% of what you think you should be doing. And so there is this kind of precarious nature to even just navigating the Feywild and the people within the Feywild.
Yeah. And I like that. I mean, as a dungeon master, the way you're describing this, I feel like this is such a great way to do a weird, absurd plot hook, right? Like, oh, you offended the Fae's sense of hospitality, so now you have to go do X, Y, and Z in order to make it up to them, or you'll be destroyed, right? And it's like this weird, oh, I'm on this whole quest because I spilled tea. Just seems so
right. And it's a weird side quest, and you can be pulled in different directions, and you can. There's so much that a DM can take here and develop parts of the Feywild, and create just these interesting Fey creatures with their own quirks. That there's something about that that's really fascinating. And going through the Wild Beyond the Witchlight and the adventure gives so many examples of how to approach it.
Cool. All right. Well, what about the next rule, the rule of ownership?
Yeah, the rule of ownership. So essentially, it boils down to don't take what's not yours, right? And so, I mean, it's pretty clear. You don't want to. You can't take things like whether it's whatever it is. You're not supposed to steal it unless it has been offered. There is this sense of ownership, and bear in mind that the things that a Fey creature might find valuable or claim ownership over also might be weird and quirky. So you might have the one that I collect buttons or whatever. Yep. And so if you take one of my buttons, like, that's my prized button, you better be careful, like that kind of a thing. And so even the concept of ownership, and not just objects, they might have the sense of ownership over an emotion, or you as a visitor to the Feywild might have things that are incorporeal. You might have memories that people might want to take, and so these laws are there to guard visitors from being having their things stolen by brigands in the Feywild. Now, here's the thing: when Zybilna was active as the Archfey in her domain, she adhered to these rules strictly, and therefore everybody had to adhere to those rules in her Archdomain strictly. In her absence, the hags kind of vary in terms of their commitment to adhering to these rules and their interpretation of that. So if there are brigands that are, taking things, or if there is a thief that is stealing, it might be at the hag's behest that they are doing it. And so there's this, especially when the hags themselves see their individual realms as theirs, that they own those realms, and therefore everything that is in those realms. And so again, so much of this is about the interpretation and the ability of the particular Archfey who has set these rules to enforce them.
What about like you said, innocuous things could be thought of as stealing. Like, so if you were to take a drink from a stream, then would something like that be stealing from the spirit of that stream, or the ruler of the domain, and that would be enough to say you're violating this law? That
is space for a DM to play, for sure. It's something that, like, you can get bogged down in it, if you're just like going to start cataloging everything, and but that's a fun thing. If you're a DM and your party, your players, the characters are just, they're trying to look for a place to rest, and they try to take a sip from this river, and this river spirit says, hey, whoa, what you doing, kind of thing. Like that's a fun interaction. That's a fun place to introduce an NPC. You might have somebody kind of just standing around, and you might have a smaller Fey creature say, hey, you're stealing my sunlight, that kind of thing. You're in this is my spot, you're stealing my sunlight. And so you can have all sorts of fun ways that this can be interpreted, or not, or you can play it much more strictly. It's about objects. It's about things that can be contained, like a memory, or you could steal like perhaps the color from somebody's eyes, right? Things like that, characteristics. And so as a DM, you can play with those types of things, and as a player, you can latch onto that, and then you can also, the moment you start getting this sense of how the world works here, how the rules of this world work, you can also start taking advantage of these things and start kind of playing that. And that's a fun way to show that you are kind of acclimating to the Feywild. So I think that's a fun. These rules allow players to take a place that seems outlandish and so different, and then get this kind of sense of mastery as they go through the adventure.
And is it the type of thing where an NPC or a Fey creature could be like, you're doing, you're violating this rule because you're taking something from me, and then the players could be like, well, you violated this from me. And the example that came to my mind was like, oh, you're taking my time by doing this, and you're stealing that. And so I say that you're violating my thing, and then having that interaction is enough for the Fae to be like, okay, you do belong here.
Yeah, I think you've nailed, you've hit on exactly what is fun about this, and I think, or what can be fun about it. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to play with how to work the rules to your advantage, but also creating characters that have figured out their own little niche way to work those rules.
Yeah. That's cool stuff. I love that. And I love the idea of memories being stolen or experiences, or colors, like you said. Like, I can imagine a Fae, if a player character has like a scarf that's red, and then a Fae being like, that's my color red. You can't wear that. And you're stealing that from me. That's my shade.
Right.
That
Right.
I've killed everybody else in this world that has that shade of red, and it's mine, and you have it now. And that type of absurdity is where these all come from.
Yeah, and I think that just the memorable interactions that this sets up, I think, is just limitless. And I'm excited to run this and just to run adventures here, whether it's going through the adventure of the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, or just kind of playing little one shots in the Feywild itself. I think it's going to be, I'm going to have a ton of fun with it. Remains to be seen if my players will. Yeah.
So the third law, what was the third rule that you wanted to go over?
Yeah. So this is the rule of reciprocity. This is the idea that if you are presented with a gift, you are supposed to return a gift, not return the gift you were given, but exchange it for a gift that is seen kind of equivalent value. And this goes again to, it plays to this idea that you might not know that you've been given a gift. So, right, if somebody kind of offers you tea or the idea of what constitutes a gift is kind of up for grabs to a degree, or up to interpretation. And also what is considered valuable as an exchange. So, you might offer gold, and that particular Fae creature finds gold just reprehensible, and they might they would rather have your ability to smile, like that. Like, you have a great smile, I want that, and they might take that, or that's the thing that they find valuable, or they might find the last crumbs from a sandwich the most valuable. These are the choicest morsels, are the final crumbs. But discovering what those things are is part of the joy of navigating the Feywild. So hospitality, ownership, and reciprocity, these are the fixed rules in Prismeer. Not necessarily all of the Feywild adheres to this, but these are specifically for Prismeer. But the interpretation of those is where the fun role-playing opportunities come in, and the potential for danger if these are violated.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So, like, if violating these, what's the consequences? Like, does that change from Fae to Fae, or is there a set kind of like, okay, well, you didn't give me a gift, so I now can steal from you whatever I want? How does that work?
That's definitely, that varies from Fae creature to Fae creature, especially because in Zybilna's absence, like, there's no kind of great arbiter of how to kind of mete out justice, and so no place to take these grievances, really. And so it's kind of up to these Fae, and some might just be offended and be like, I was going to help you, but I'm not going to anymore. And they might just be on their way. They might deliberately get you lost or turned around. They might try to cause you harm if they find the offense was great enough to do so. But the idea of leading astray is probably the most Fae thing possible. I think that it is open to interpretation, or it's open. Sorry, the reaction varies from Fae to Fae for sure.
So there's not one that's more like, if you do this, it's death. It's more what how can they use this interpretation of these rules in order to gain some type of benefit for them?
Yep. And different Fae creatures might prioritize these three differently, right? Or they might just be doing the bare minimum because that's what they're supposed to do here. So, like, even the degree to which they're attached to these things might vary from Fae to Fae. But the universal thing is that all Fae creatures know that these things exist, and so there is kind of this there's this joy about, being outsiders to the Feywild and discovering these things for yourself, while everybody around you already kind of knows how this works. And of course, this is how you do it. There are the rules of hospitality, ownership, and reciprocity. Like, come on, like get with the program kind of concept. And so,
would Fey assume you know these things, or would they attempt to educate you if they know that you are an outsider?
I think that's a fine question. I think most Fey would work under the assumption that you know what's up, that you know what this is. Now, if they discover that you don't know what it is, that opens the opportunity for them to take advantage of that or to be helpful. Not all Fey creatures are there to get you turned around. Some are genuinely helpful, and they have this kind of exuberance that you expect with in the Feywild, but there are those that are just jerks in the most Fey way possible.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do they refer to it as the way we've been referring to it, like as this is the rule of reciprocity, or do they just say you give gift, I give gift? That's how it works, or like how do Fey themselves refer to this etiquette?
In Prismere, most Fey, I mean, obviously there are always exceptions, but I think most Fey have a direct understanding of the three rules.
But they wouldn't say like you have violated my rule of hospitality necessarily.
They might. I'm being cagey about this because like those are tools that a DM can use if the players need that kind of extra push of like what's going on here. That's something that a DM can deploy, right? They can be more direct in talking about it, but they don't have to be. If the players are having fun, kind of being lost in this kind of Alice in Wonderlandy type experience, they can hold that information back. So, but as long as the NPCs are kind of adhering to those things, the players will get a grasp of what those things are. But so I think it's fun to play, kind of get a gauge of how much your players need that information or how much fun they're having kind of in this nebulous kind of state.
And I could see that like some Fey creatures who are more learned in their mode of speech would call it what it is and use words like reciprocity and things like that, whereas some wouldn't,
Right. Or just like, or not care. They might kind of say the word wrong or whatever, the one, the receiving rule or whatever, or whatever it is.
The receiving rule. I like that. Yeah. That seems like
exactly. They're like, oh yeah, that's my favorite rule. I get stuff, and so you could play with that as well. I just think that how you deploy these rules and how you interpret them and even how the denizens talk about them is just so rich in how to give a Feywild experience to your players.
Cool. Yeah, I really like that idea of each Fey having maybe different names or ways of referring to these things. Like the gift giving game, but it's not a game. It's you have to actually do it, or you're violating.
Yeah, this is, yeah. You either win the game or get your knees broke. Like that.
Or you get a white elephant gift, and it's actually a white elephant.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I want to play at your table. I want you to run one of these.
I just want to be able to hand someone, here's the white elephant. You actually got it now, and then you get crushed under it. Super fun. All right, awesome. Well, I love the difference of this. It feels similar to the way we were talking about Avernus and how contracts work with devils, but completely different and absurd. And I like the comparison to Alice in Wonderland, right? That kind of like lost and not knowing, and part of the fun of these types of sessions set in the Feywild and in the Wild Beyond the Wishlight will be about discovering those things.
I just want to say, like, that was something we were actually pretty aware of going into it. We didn't want rules and these rules of exchange and all this kind of stuff that is kind of built into a lot of Fey folklore. We knew we wanted to drive a pretty thick wedge between that and the way contracts in Avernus work. Right? We didn't want them to feel the same. And there's this kind of sense of the particular with contracts, right? Of the minutia of you have to read the fine print. You're dealing in souls, and there's this magnitude that comes with that. And then the Feywild, this casual sense of existing in the Feywild, you're kind of participating in deals just by being there, right? By entering a home, by talking with the denizens there. Just as these actions themselves, you find yourself already kind of wrapped up in kind of this Fey etiquette, and you're kind of bound to that to a degree, or as much as you want to, put yourself in peril by not. We liked that kind of the difference in approaches to those two aspects.
Right. And I think that's a great way to explain it. Like, contracts are about the known rules and how they can't be changed, and the Feywild is about the interpretation of those rules and how that can vary from entity to entity. Yeah,
and it's malleable, and the other one is so rigid and fixed. And so that's also a nice palate cleanser if you've been in Avernus and you're going over to to the Feywild. It's like, oh, this is very different and maddening in a different kind of way. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, that's super cool stuff. I can't wait for more D&D fans to get into The Wild Beyond the Witchlight when it releases on September 21st. Very exciting, and we'll learn more about it as we get closer to it. Thank you, Ari, for coming on and talking through this.
It was a pleasure.
I feel like I have to give you a gift. So I will give you this coffee cup mug.
All right. I will collect that. It actually
looks like a little Fey-like.
It does. It does. It's good.
Awesome. How can people find out about you and what you're doing, and perhaps give you some gifts?
I am at Ari Levitch on Twitter, and beyond that, I'm kind of have a hermit existence.
As many of us do now.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So
awesome. Cool. All right. Well, give Ari a follow, and we'll be back with more segments next week.
Great. Talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.